Good afternoon and welcome to the Canadian Museum of Civilization. Dr. Fredrik Hiebert, archaeologist and explorer, has traced ancient trade routes overland and across the seas for more than 25 years. Dr. Hiebert has led excavations at Silk Road archaeological sites across Asia, from Egypt to Mongolia. His excavations at a 4,000-year-old Silk Road city in Turkmenistan made headlines around the world. He also conducts underwater archaeology projects in the Black Sea and in South America's highest lake in search of submerged settlements. Dr. Hiebert completed his doctoral dissertation at Harvard University in 1992 and held the Robert H. Dyson Chair of Archaeology at the University of Pennsylvania before joining the National Geographic Society in 2003. He participated in the rediscovery of the lost Bactrian gold in Afghanistan in 2003 and is currently the curator of National Geographic's exhibition, Afghanistan: Hidden Treasures from the National Museum, Kabul. Hidden Treasures has toured major museums in the United States and internationally and is currently on view here at the Canadian Museum of Civilization. As National Geographic's Archaeology Fellow, Dr. Hiebert extends the enthusiasm for archaeology to the public in lectures, presentations, films, and museum exhibits. He also holds positions with the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology and the Institute for Nautical Archaeology and Robert Ballard's Institute for Exploration. Among other honors, Fred Hiebert received the Chairman's Award from the National Geographic Committee for Research and Exploration in 1998. I've had the honor of working with Dr. Hiebert on the Hidden Treasures exhibition here at the CMC, and this is a warning: his passion and enthusiasm for Afghanistan's archaeology is very contagious. Today, Dr. Hiebert will tell us the story behind the hidden treasures of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara, and thanks to the Canadian Museum of Civilizations, especially the director, Victor Rabinovich. And thank you all for coming out on this sunny, beautiful day here in Ottawa. I realize that many of you would prefer to be outside sunbathing, but I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to come here and take an adventure to another part of the world, to see another type of culture, and experience it, especially here in this wonderful museum, a Museum of Civilizations. And we want to expand the Canadian Museum of Civilizations to other parts of the world, and in this case, the area is Afghanistan. Obviously, Canada has a very important role in Afghanistan today. We think that it's absolutely appropriate for this exhibition to be here. It celebrates the reason why Afghanistan is so important for our continued engagement. I want to tell you the story about the exhibition. This is not a description of the exhibition, which many of you have seen or will see here in the Special Exhibitions Hall at the Canadian Museum of Civilization. This is a story about how these collections came to be and what happened to them and how we got to have them as an exhibition. Before I start with that story, I like to start out with a map. Of course, I work for National Geographic, so we always have to start with a map. And this is a political map of Central Asia. It shows the location of Afghanistan in its political context, surrounded by Iran, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and even borders on a small little peninsula up in corridor up to China. So it's very centrally located. It's an area that one wonders how it could be so important in terms of world civilizations, because it's very mountainous. The geography of Afghanistan can basically be described as a big cone. It has high mountains in the center and goes out to deserts in the side. Well, actually, that geography in itself has made Afghanistan central. Central in history, central in trade, central in the development of cultures around the world. Those mountains, those high mountains, have valleys that go through them. And those valleys, for millennia, have acted as conduits for trade, a place where caravans could go and cut through the mountains, actually like a road right through the mountains. It allowed the caravans to go over the mountains and end up at cities on the edge of the deserts. And these cities that grew up on the fringes of Afghanistan were natural trading posts. We call them caravanserais. This is the ancient city of Herat at the edge of the desert and the mountains, a natural place for cities and markets to grow that facilitated this trade that developed in Afghanistan, connecting routes east and west, north and south for literally millennia. Because of this, Afghanistan has had an incredibly rich archaeological past. Some say that Afghanistan is the second richest archaeological country in the world after Egypt. If you look at the trade routes itself without all of the political connections, this is the way archaeologists look at it, you can see the trade routes from the Mediterranean to China, from India all the way north to Siberia, and the natural crossroads are in Afghanistan. So if you're interested, like I am, in studying ancient trade, the place you'd want to focus is right in the center, and that's Afghanistan. Some of the monuments that are very well known include the giant Buddhas of Bamiyan. They really are giant. Over 150 feet tall. There you can see some French archaeologists for scale at the base. These images of the Buddhas, they became world famous in the 1950s when they were described scientifically. And then, of course, they crossed the front pages of the newspapers in 2001 when the Taliban destroyed them. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the archaeological riches of Afghanistan. It's a long history, almost 100 years of history of archaeology in Afghanistan. And we have a couple of heroes who helped build this history. This is a man in the 1930s, Joseph Hakan, who was excavating along one of the Silk Road caravanserais at a site called Begram, and he was looking for a temple, and he was excavating that site, Begram, dated to about the 1st century AD, and here's his tent, and he's excavating, and he's finding these marvelous treasures. This is an ivory statue, almost 2.5 feet tall. We call it a water goddess, really a marvelous piece, which came not from a palace, but from a storeroom. And when he excavated this room, there were actually 2 rooms, he had found something that was of world importance, a merchant's storeroom from the 1st century AD that the merchant had bricked up. Perhaps all these treasures that he had in these storerooms, he got nervous about all these treasures in the 1st century AD, and he bricked up the doors, and he went away. And luckily for us archaeologists, he left, and he never came back. And the building fell apart, and all of the debris fell on top of it, and they built a fortress on top of this, and nobody knew about this until Joseph Hakan excavated it. An intact merchant's warehouse from the center of the Silk Road. It's like King Tut's tomb. Absolutely amazing to find all these things in place. Here, I'll show you a couple of the items. This is a throne, one of 12 that Joseph Hakan found. And this is what archaeologists can do. We can reconstruct what these thrones would have looked like. Could you imagine the Kushan kings who would have sat on these thrones? Probably local kings, sold to local kings in Afghanistan. Marvelous piece of artwork, and found where? But in Afghanistan. Really a remarkable piece of art history.